So, some of you know of me. I wrote the Nugget Shooters Field Guide, and some of you may not know me. But I wrote this started in 2016, finished it in 2019. It was published in 2020. And I used to write for ICMJ, Mining Journal. And I'm now a Mine Lab Detector. I'm sponsored by Mine Lab to be a social media influencer for metal detecting. And Detector is somebody that Mine Lab considers an expert in their line of detecting, and they have about 12 to 24 people worldwide for different areas, from coin hunting, beach hunting, gold hunting, and different things. So I was approached by Mine Lab in Quartzsite the year before last to be a Mine Lab Detector, because I live full time out of my truck and in a tent, traveling back and forth from Montana, Arizona, hunting gold. And I strictly use only Mine Lab. I use what gets me the gold. But anyway, how many of you have heard, or you're hunting a certain area and you think, if this is what the gold is like here, what's it going to be like if I go further up the mountain? Right? Okay. Well, I'm going to throw a spin on it for you. I was in Havasu hunting this year, and in December, and we were hunting all through where everybody's been hunting and going up, high up into the mountains to hunt for the nuggets. We've heard stories about it, but this area has been pounded by World War II strafing field for bombers and fighter jets. They think they fired off like 325 million rounds. So the area is littered with lead. And I saved some of that lead. But anyway, for a week, got skunked. And I had a trainee that was coming up. And the first day out, I took him out and up in that area and got him the basics on his 7,000 and stuff of what I use to hunt for gold. And the next day, I'm like, I can't take him back up there and get skunked, because he was paying for 3 days. But I had a gut feeling that I wanted to go further out, like a few miles further out from where everybody's been hunting gold. Like, it was 4 miles, 5 miles. And I told him, I said, Chris, we're going to do something different. I said, my gut feeling tells me we need to go lower. I said, there was a 30-something or 40-something ounce nugget that was found out by the highway that had come down out of those mountains. And I started thinking, there's more of that kind of gold somewhere out there. If that can get down all the way to the highway, then, you know, people need to be looking further out. So I played on my hunch, and I said, today we're going further out, away from everybody. And we got out into an area, and I stopped and I told him, I said, if you start finding gold in certain places, pay attention to the terrain, the rocks, how high their terrain is, the vegetation. Pay attention to every single detail. And then when you're in another area, it could be 50 miles away, 10,000 miles away, or 600, whatever. But when you see that type of terrain, detect there, because gold sometimes it has a similar terrain that you'll find it in if you're not sure about a certain area. We passed a certain area, and I said this looks like an area I hunt up around Gold Basin and Lost Basin, Arizona. So I said, we're going to push further back in here and look for some more sign. And we got into an area where there was a lot of contact zones. Just every few feet there was different type of contact zones.
Rich, what's a contact zone?
Contact zone is from one rock type to another rock type. It could be granodiorite and limestone, or it could be granodiorite and cinnabar. It could be anything, but it's just where two rocks come together. It's a contact zone, and that can be a hot point for gold distribution. So there was quartz just laden all over these little tiny knolls. They look like moguls in snow country, right? In ski areas. And I said, I'm pretty sure we're gonna find gold here. But we were gonna push up towards this other area. And we got off the quads, and Chris worked the kind of top of this knoll, and I went over to the other side to a little wash. And literally, as soon as we turned our detectors on and started swinging, we both found gold. And I said, I found a nugget. He's like, I did too. And then he found another one, and I found another one, and I hadn't come back in from the bottom. And I said, see, I said, when you get a hunch like that, you got to play it and go for it. But so many people get hung up with wanting to go further up into the mountains, and I wanted to go further out because of what I know about mass wasting and floods. I think there's a lot of misconception around about gold distribution, and I think that we're all just guessing, even the most talented geologists. But I don't know how many of you people to believe in that old Earth geological history, but I'm in the belief of a young Earth. After all, the old Earth theory didn't come up until the early 19th century. But before that, everybody believed it was a young Earth. But I think that the flood period during the biblical time had a major role to do with gold distribution, because at that time, the earth split open with volcanic activity and the fountains of the deep sprung forth. And we know that we have huge aquifers that are under the earth. When the floods receded, the earth split open again to allow the waters to recede. And that's probably around the time of the Cretaceous period, which I'm finding out was a pretty big area of massive amounts of water and geologic activity. At that time, Antarctica was still part of Australia, and it hadn't broken away. In the United States, the Cretaceous Seaway stretched from the Arctic all the way down to the southern end of South America. And Montana, the Rocky Mountains hadn't even started rising yet. So, like with our area, but our claims, we have these skarns. But sometimes we get what might be a misconception with how things are deposited. Like a lot of people think that the mountains up around where we're at were higher. That may be so, and then they eroded down. But there's nothing to say that these skarn deposits didn't take place when it was underwater, as opposed to being on dry land. Skarn deposits are deposits of type of epithermal deposits that happen deep in the earth, and they never reach the surface. They cool down in the earth's crust, and then all of that land above it gets eroded away and worn down to that deposit, and then it's exposed. And a lot of times those deposits will be very tight in an area where the skarn is. Other times they can encompass enormous area. But all of the richest gold deposits in the world today are all skarn deposits. And sometimes they can be very fine gold, other times they can be nugget rich. And with skarn deposits, they cook, the granodiorite and the quartz gets cooked out of it, and you're left with straight nuggets. And I would think that it probably, with that heat and pressure, that it'll probably, to some degree, affect the shape of the nuggets to where they're more worn looking as opposed to crystalline. Why you get that, I'm thinking.
And we had this talk the other day about that, about people, we've been talking recently about how people think this gold has traveled a long ways just because it's rounded off or flat, or we're thinking, especially where we're at, that that's not necessarily been the case. It was formed that way or rounded that way in the deposit itself.
Yeah, now
instead of traveling.
Right, these skarn deposits, there you got chemicals, natural chemicals, you have magma, you have water, and that whole process is a process called metasomatism, and it's the act of one rock being disintegrated and replaced with another rock simultaneously, and the rock will retain its shape, everything about it. But the very nature of a skarn is heat, pressure, and erosion, and it happens simultaneously. So with that kind of heat, we started thinking maybe this gold is, because I know it's skarn gold, but you know, you can kind of think on the path that it's traveled in here, but no, the rocks all say that it's skarn. So why is it, you know, looking like it is? Well, maybe it's because of heat. But so many people go further up into areas, but a lot of times gold deposits, because of mass wasting, can get completely pushed out of certain areas and be miles away. And I'd like to encourage you guys to try going further out and looking for the clues and detecting. And sometimes areas that look like they're deep, you can get discouraged and say, oh, there's not going to be anything there because it's too deep. But I know for a fact, gold hunting full-time for a living, Montana and Arizona, that you don't always have to find nice gold on the bedrock. It'll be in the loose stuff. And I mean, this stuff, the ones that Chris found, they were in just on the loose stuff. Where we found that deposit, there were no old-timer workings, there were no detector holes, there was nothing out there except 30 cal bullets and 50 cal bullets. But we found gold out there, and then we went back and I found a 1.1 gram nugget out there, and it's a big area. But if you stay determined and don't let your mind psych you out to talk you out of hitting it, because that's a big thing. I face that every day. It's hard to beat it. But you just have to push through it. And so many times when I push through that and I fight that, I am pleasantly surprised by the nuggets that I find. I found an 18 grammer in November. I had my back against the wall. I had negative $71 in my account and no cash in my pocket. And I went out there, and as I got close to where I was going to hunt, it was an area that wasn't up in the mountains, but it was further out. I said, today's going to be my day to find a big nugget. Half an hour later, I was digging up an 18 gram, and I sold it the next day for $1,175. It was a specimen. So, but you know, it can be, I don't know if any of you guys go down to Arizona, but it doesn't matter if it's Arizona or here in Montana, but try looking further out, because geology is a funny thing with gold, and gold has ways of throwing you for a loop when you know theoretically it should be here and it's not, or it should be over there and it's not. Another thing, Ophir Gulch, a lot of the big gold was blown out of the mountains, and it was out in the meadows and the flats out there. Sometimes it's deep, sometimes if you look for certain areas, the right geology, for your favor, you can find an area that's going to be suitable for detecting. But never assume just because the ground, it looks like it's deep, that it's going to be deep. So many times I've dug down, or I found a nugget and I realized it was only like that deep to the bedrock. and it's really easy to think. Have you ever experienced that, Gary? Yeah. So that's what I wanted to talk to you guys about, but look further out of the mountains. Another thing too, you go further up into the mountains and you're gonna have a lot more trash up there, because it seems like every time I go up into a hard rock area, there's 10 times more trash than placer areas. And if you go further out away from those placer areas, you'll be surprised what you can end up finding with a metal detector, with a nugget. And does anyone have any questions or that sparks any kind of train of thought?
I'll add to that kind of out theory too, is Montana has a lot of glacial till, meaning, and flood areas, meaning that the glaciers came through here, and as they're going, they're just bulldozing out of the mountains on their way out. So they're mixing and turning and mixing and turning this material and mass wasting this material out, way out sometimes. And so that's a lot of times during these big flood events, and a lot of big glacial floods blew through the mountains, blew things out, and it's just turning and turning, and sometimes it didn't give it enough time to settle on the bedrock. And so that's why, like, Deer Lodge area, Deer Lodge to Gold Creek over in that area is massive, massive glacial till area, and there's nuggets on the top and there's nuggets 100 feet down.
Right.
So,
and something I was thinking about too, that with the Great Flood, you know, that water's got to go somewhere, and it's a period of intense geologic activity, earthquakes, and thrusting up of the mountain starting to thrust up, earth splitting open and water receding. But if you were to imagine, if you take like an area with a balloon, like a long, wide, flat balloon, throw dirt over it, throw clay over it and everything, and then throw some like lead shot in there, and then some water on top of that, and then you start blowing that balloon up, kind of simulating volcanic and earthquake geologic activity. That water's being displaced, right? So as the mountains are coming up, you're going to create a lot of heavy, high energy deposits that are going to be cutting through certain parts of landscape and scouring areas out and then redepositing it in certain areas. And that might be another thing that's taking place up around our claim, because I think that the gold was put down before those mountains rose up, or at least maybe when they were hilly or whatever. But what I'm talking about right now, I'm going to be applying tomorrow. You know, I apply it all the time, but for area bar claims, I'm going outside the norm, and sometimes I get lucky, sometimes I don't find anything, but I stick with it, and eventually when I find something, it puts a pretty big smile on your face when you stick with it. But tomorrow I'll be doing that, exactly what I'm talking about. I'm going not even on our claims, but I had another brainstorm this morning, so.
I don't know about this. Well, on that, Moose Creek is a mystery to an extent. It's a weird, blown out of the mountain, weird event over there.
But you have your rivers, and in some cases,
but a lot of those rivers are way,
moved
could be, but
drastically.
Moose Creek doesn't exhibit a lot of river placer. It's more volcanic mud flow on top of a volcanic clay layer, and to me it looks like one big event, one big mass event came through there, blew it in there somehow, because
I talked to a geologist yesterday about it. He's a master's degree geologist, he's a consultant, and he says they drilled out on Moose Creek. There was big claims up there at one time.
Right.
I said, where did the gold come from? And I heard volcanics. He says, yeah, it all come out of the highlands. It all come out of the
just
big
blew
heat.
out. Yeah.
With all the veins in the highlands.
Yeah, and that's what Reese is saying. Like it,
Yeah.
you know,
And
all the
that-
gold blew out, came down.
The Triassic area. So what?
Yeah, before
123 million
the
years ago.
Cretaceous, and and it settled on that hard volcanic
They call
mud
them
layer.
Impediments, all the impediments, all the way across there should
Yeah.
have gold in them.
Yeah, all over,
That's the thing with the Highlands. There's gold camps on every side.
every side.
You know,
Well, one of the richest copper strikes in the world right now, and gonna be a bigger factor, is Silver Star. I mean, the testing numbers coming out of Silver Star for barren gold are off the charts, and it's scarring, big time scarring, copper scarring, gold scarring.
Yeah.
So the Highlands are a highly rich area, and it just blowed out.
I have a geophysicist friend that I keep asking, well, how can I, figure out where to go? And he says, well, if you look at our area of southwest Montana here, it came from Idaho. So if you find a nugget here, it might not be in the correct form, because the planes that move, all these things you see popping up, they came from Idaho. So you're looking at several hundred miles away. Where
That's way out.
It's a big
probably
mystery.
formed, and it's all moved and shoved. So as you go down here by Melrose, there's a place down there called Block Mountain. Popped up out of that, it's 1 billion years old. That's why they send all the geology classes down to look at it. So we're not looking at stuff that happened, a few hundred years ago or 1,000 years ago. Some of these things are over 1 billion years old, and that's what
Billions.
he says, just because you find nuggets here or a patch there, he says, that don't mean they weren't anywhere near there. They could have been, they could have come over with the rest of the stuff.
Yeah, that was a theory from Will Hireman up at Ophir. One of the geologists went up there, was like, this gold all came from Canada.
Oh, yeah, I remember him saying about that.
And we're like, well, considering there's scarns like 360 degrees around these
Yeah, our
areas.
area is big time scarring gold, and there's big gold around there. A friend of mine, Brendan, he holds, well, his claim, his gold's not scarring gold, but there's some scarring claims up there where big nuggets, like our claim, biggest nugget that came off of our claim was 6.5 ounces detecting, and it was solid gold, worn gold, but it came from a scarring.
Yeah, I was telling Reese, like, the current state record, blah, 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 came out of the Highlands, but I've been doing this old research on up there, all over, old newspaper research. Pardee, you guys, if you ever want to
Are you talking about the one that
It's
Ed
in-
Risen found?
This is in the 1870s.
Yeah, Ed Risen found that 27 pounder.
Yeah, so, yeah, and so, if it was in that area, but a really good, and I can send this to you, to any of you, and I think I told you, Reese, about it, but there's a publication by Pardee and those guys that did a huge broad scoping geological, pretty much cataloging this whole entire region, and it is super in-depth and super interesting.
Yeah, I like the Pardee and Schrader's.
If anybody
They've got
wants
quite
this.
detailed, and I find a lot of good, helpful keywords that I look for with their, I mean, they'll talk about what the gravels look like in this, the gold that was carried in, what the barren gravels look like. They describe a lot.
Yeah, it's called the Pardee 842. You can Google it or I can send it to you. And it has everything from the Highlands to Gold Creek to Raidersburg to Avon and beyond. And in depth. It's a really fun research read. So yeah, that big nugget was up there, but it was kind of closer to Carpenter, kind of
Yeah,
monster and documented.
right. And on another note, does anyone have any questions as far as operating Mine Labs detectors, whether it's the Manticore or?
Yeah, he's got one, I got one. He's got one.
Go ahead.
I have a Monster 1000. I'm just learning to use it. Gary's helped us a little bit.
Gary knows a lot about it.
Yeah, we were just a couple weeks ago, but, one thing that's kind of confusing is it has the little needle thing, and it goes from a nail, where it says has a nail, to gold, and it just goes, flips back and forth. Well, then, I find, you know, like a nail. It goes over to the gold. Why does it do that? Why doesn't it
Because-
just stay over by the nail?
Sometimes big iron will register, it'll lock on to gold. But every detector that's got a discrimination, when you get down a certain depth, it's saying that there's something there, but it doesn't know for sure if it's iron or if it's trash. And that's why it's going back and forth from the iron to the chance of gold. And it could be going iron, 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 gold, iron, iron, and I'm gonna dig it. Because anytime it goes into that gold side, I know that it could be a piece of gold at extreme depth. You know, and as you scrape a layer back, it might change. It might be like iron, iron, gold, 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 iron, iron, gold. But as you get closer to where the electronics in there can lock on, it's kind of like a missile. Like if a fighter jet has to be able, you can't just like point it at the other jet and fire the missile. His probability of hitting it's not very good. But once he gets that circle locked on to where the electronics can lock on, that missile's going to hit the plane every time. And the electronics and discrimination in a detector is kind of the same way. It's saying there's something there, but I can't lock on to what it is. Get me closer, and I'll tell you exactly what it is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, when in doubt, scrape. All the time. Go through a pair of boots twice a year. But yeah, there's so many nuggets. I'm sure Gary's found a lot like this too, where if you just scrape past it a little bit, that will change on that back and forth. And the 6,000, same thing. I don't know if any of you have 6,000s other than Gary and Jamie and Hannah, but you got one. My very first nugget I got with the 6,000 did not give a repeatable signal. It was just a single spike in the threshold. And with that curiosity, it sounded like the threshold, but yet different. And I took a chance on it, and I scraped a little bit back, and nothing. And then I'm searching for it again. I had to keep going over it like 10 to 20 times before I heard it again. I'm like, there it is. And then I quickly scraped another layer back, about that much, and all of a sudden, real faint, you could hear this. I'm like, did I really hear that, or did I just get lucky? But then I started getting a lot of them like that, where I was listening for that at that point. And one of my videos on my claim, I dug up a 0.6 of the 2 nugget that was shaped like a heart, 14 inches deep, 0.6, 2. And it was not repeatable. It was just a single spike mixed in with the threshold. And I just kept going back over it, trying to find it again. I'm like, there it is. So if you have a 6,000, be listening for that. It's really hard to try to teach someone that, because you never know when it's going to happen. And I'm still trying to get it on film, but now I can't because I sold my 6. But
It took me a long time to learn that single spike listen.
I told you about it right off.
I know, and you just don't hear it until you hear it, until you know. And then you hear that just above threshold spike on a single one.
And it won't even be loud over the threshold. If this is how high the threshold is, sometimes it'll just be right there. Or just...
What do you hear? Just a louder threshold?
Just
it's just
a spike.
It's
like
just a certain sound in the threshold.
To me, it sounds like the horn on a bug car. It's like a beat, like woo, and it's just not normal on the threshold. Like it sounds like to me, a car horn honk. Everybody has a little different hearing. To me, it just sounds like like an old school bug honk. And then I'm like scrape back, and then I'm like, and I'm like, ha, gotcha.
Yeah. So you're picking up on it.
Yeah.
And if you know about it, listen for it.
Yeah.
You'll eventually hear one like that, but the key is, when in doubt, scrape. And the more you scrape, the more you're gonna pick up on that, and you'll find out what we're talking about with that, and you'll end up upping your gold take.
One thing on the Monster too, I don't use it much anymore, but one thing I noticed with the Monster is if you slow your swing way down,
Yeah.
it gives that processor, that brain in there, that computer processor time to figure out what it's listening for. It makes a big difference. It's early on, swinging fast. I've been getting a blip, but on the gauge, it's like boom, boom, slight gold, mostly iron. And then I would slow down, and it was iron. You know, you still scrape, and then another thing too, you're gonna run into some places that are gonna really throw you. It's got most of it. It's just called hot ground. It's highly mineralized ground. Raidersburg's full of it. Lots of places are full of it. If you slow that Monster down, and you get to that, and you're like digging, nothing's there. You're like, what is this? What is this? Pump that detector over it, which is ground balancing, right? That's teaching the machine what's going on in that ground, and then slow your swing way down. A lot of times you'll get rid of that. It'll go away if it's hot ground. It just disappears, and then you're like, well, that's definitely hot ground. Because I'll tell you right now, gold don't go away. You know, it may not hammer over to that right side on the Monster and say, I'm definitely gold right away. But once that machine picks up that gold, unless you kick it out of your pile, or sometimes they'll turn on their side when they're small and you can't really hear them that well. But that machine, once it knows it's gold, it's not gonna lose it. It'll teach itself to get rid of hot ground or hot rocks. And you're gonna wrestle with that a little bit.
Now,
it doesn't always make it go away, but a lot of times it does.
You know, you ever pass over a target and it like maybe chirps one way every time you pass back over it? You better investigate and scrape a layer back.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times that's going to be a further down piece of gold or a piece of iron trash, something that's down deep, and it's at the farthest realm of what it can pick up on. So it's only getting the hit one way, and as you reduce the material down, it's going to start coming back and forth both ways, and it may say iron majority, and then when you get it closer, it's going to lock on. A lot of people, like with the 5,000, 4,500, 4,000, a lot of people hate the discrimination on those because they say that it doesn't work worth a damn. I beg to differ, because I think it works fantastic for what it is. They never meant that discrimination to be competing on a scale with like the Equinox or the Manticore or the any of the other coin machines they had out at the time, the E-Track. What they meant for that to be was to be able to tell iron trash from non-ferrous targets. That's it. And it only worked within 6 inches. You have to be within 6 inches of the target for it to start working.
Yeah, that would be coil with it.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, the Manticore doesn't have the dial, it has the smudge marks.
It's
So
got
why
the
did they
target
do
trace
that?
screen. So the target trace screen, the center line is your conductivity line. And you have the gray bar above it, and then down below you have like a little narrow thing that kind of comes over, which you can adjust that. And I tried adjusting that, and I said, I don't know how to get this back. So I just did a factory reset. But if you don't know how that part works, I would just leave it with how they have it set for prospecting. But that target trace screen, your gold, silver will show up on that line. It will also show up above it or below it. More so below it than above it.
Yeah, because when we were at the outing Saturday, we're hunting coins, is what I was hunting. But I noticed that the smudge mark, it looked like a little worm coming across.
That's
Just
gonna be
a
trash.
dot
Was it
or-
trash?
No, it was a quarter.
It was a quarter. It was a clad quarter.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's because it's got iron in it,
Yeah.
steel.
But it's just weird how that, it's hard to tell what you're finding.
Right.
Because you're just getting smudge marks.
Right.
Right.
Your good target is going to be a flat out solid
Circle.
dot,
Dot.
Yeah.
period.